Good morning, 8th grade. It is a new week. We are into week 2 of our virtual learning from our homes. My hope for you is that you feel ready for another strong week of teaching and learning, that you are feeling safe and comfortable with your families and at home, and that you have everything that you need. I suggest making sure, of course, that you're checking in with your friends, a text message, a FaceTime, whatever you guys do, and make sure everyone's doing okay. Also encourage each other to keep super busy and to be watching our videos and doing our classwork and stuff like that. Today we're going to start with our reading of Night. Our goal today is to read 10 pages. That's what we're going to try to do every day this week. So we're going to try to read page 47 to page 57. And then the comprehension questions I want you to be answering in the Google Classroom. So if you or your friends are still doing them on lined paper, if you're able to do them on the Google Classroom, please do, because then I can see that you're doing the work and I can give you the credit for it, even though I can't see your genius face. We're going to start today on page 47. In the last chapter, a lot happened. A lot of time started to pass, and Ellie and his father have gotten settled into the concentration camp. They were moved from Auschwitz to Buna. They were part of the last transport, and now we're going to learn a little bit more about what life at the camp called Buna is going to be like. I want you to really make sure that you are taking care of yourself as we read this challenging book. I think that there is definitely a possibility that reading about something this sad and this intense could be really hard right now. So I want you to make sure that you're giving yourself breaks when you need to, that you're asking me questions and researching things, and that you are letting this inspire you instead of stress you out, all right? So on page 47, we're going to begin. And I've got my Penn Charter mug that I'm drinking my coffee out of today, so shout out to future Penn Charter student. The camp looked as though it had been through an epidemic, empty and dead. Only a few well-dressed inmates were wandering between the blocks. Of course, we had to first pass through the showers. The head of the camp joined us there. He was a stocky man with big shoulders, the neck of a bull, thick lips, and curly hair. He gave an impression of kindness. From time to time, a smile would linger in his gray-blue eyes. Our convoy included a few 10 and 12-year-olds. The officer took an interest in them and gave orders to bring them food. We were given new clothing and settled into 2 tents. We were to wait there until we could be incorporated into work commandos. Then we would be assigned to a block. Remember, commandos are sort of like your groups or your class, right? So they're looking to get assigned to work commandos, work groups, and organization. In the evening, the commandos returned from the workyard. Roll call. We began looking for people that we knew, asking the veterans which work commandos were the best and which block one should try to enter. All of the inmates agreed. Buna is a very good camp. One can hold one's own here. The most important thing is to not be assigned to the construction commando, as if we had a choice. Our tent leader was German, an assassin's face with fleshy lips and hands resembling a wolf's paws. The camp's food had agreed with him, and he could hardly move, he was so fat. Like the head of the camp, he liked children. Immediately after our arrival, he had bread brought for them, and soup and margarine. In fact, this affection was not entirely altruistic. There existed here a veritable traffic of children among homosexuals, I learned later. He told us, "You will stay with me for 3 days in quarantine. Afterwards, you will go to work. Tomorrow, medical checkup." One of his aides, a tough-looking boy with shifty eyes, came over to me. "Would you like to get into a good commando?" "Of course, but on one condition. I want to stay with my father." "All right," he said. "I can arrange it. For a pittance. Your shoes. I'll give you another pair." I refused to give him my shoes. They were all I had left. "I will also give you a ration of bread with some margarine." He liked my shoes. I would not let him have them. Later, they were taken away from me anyway. in exchange for nothing at that time. The medical checkup took place outside, early in the morning, before 3 doctors seated on a bench. The first hardly examined me. He just asked, "Are you in good health?" Who would have dared to admit the opposite? On the other hand, the dentist seemed more conscientious. He asked me to open my mouth wide. In fact, he was not looking for decay, but for gold teeth. Those who had gold in their mouths were listed by their number. I did have a gold crown. The first 3 days went by quickly. On the 4th day, as we stood in front of our tent, the capos appeared. Each one began to choose the men he liked. You. They pointed their fingers the way that one might choose cattle or merchandise. We followed our capo, a young man. He made us halt at the door of the first block near the entrance to the camp. This was the orchestra's block. He motioned us inside. We were surprised. What had we to do with music? The orchestra was playing a military march, always the same. Dozens of commandos were marching off, in step to the work yards. The capos were beating in time. Left, right, left, right. SS officers, pen in hand, recorded the number of men leaving. The orchestra continued to play the same march until the last commando had passed. Then the conductor's baton stopped moving, and the orchestra fell silent. The capo yelled, "Fall in!" We fell into ranks of 5 with the musicians. We left the camp without music, but in step. We still had the march in our ears. Left, right, left, right. We struck up conversations with our neighbors, the musicians. Almost all of them were Jews. Julik, a Pole with eyeglasses and a cynical smile in a pale face. Louis, a native of Holland and a well-known violinist. He complained that they would not let him play Beethoven. Jews were not allowed to play German music. Hans, the young man from Berlin, was full of wit. The foreman was a Pole, Franek, a former student in Warsaw. Julik explained to me, "We work in a warehouse of electrical materials not far from here. The work is neither difficult nor dangerous. Only Idek, the capo, occasionally has fits of madness, and then you'd better stay out of his way." "You're lucky, little fellow," said Hans, smiling. "You fell into a good commando." 10 minutes later, we stood in front of the warehouse. A German employee, a civilian, the Meister, came to meet us. He paid as much attention to us as would a shopkeeper receiving a delivery of old rags. Our comrades were right. The work was not difficult. Sitting on the ground, we counted bolts, bulbs, and various small electrical parts. The capo launched into a lengthy explanation of the importance of this work, warning us that anyone who proved to be lazy would be held accountable. My new comrades reassured me. "Don't worry, he has to say this because of the Meister." There were many Polish civilians here, and a few French women as well. The women silently greeted the musicians with their eyes. Franek, the foreman, assigned me to a corner. "Don't kill yourself, there's no hurry, but watch out. Don't let an SS catch you." "Please, sir, I'd like to be near my father." "All right, your father will work here, next to you." We were lucky. 2 boys came to join our group, Yossi and Tibi, 2 brothers from Czechoslovakia whose parents had been exterminated in Birkenau. They lived for each other, body and soul. They quickly became friends. Having once belonged to a Zionist youth organization, they knew countless Hebrew songs, and we would sometimes hum melodies evoking the gentle waters of the Jordan River and the majestic sanctity of Jerusalem. We often spoke about Palestine. Their parents, like mine, had not had the courage to sell everything and emigrate while there was still time. We decided that if we were allowed to live until the liberation, we would not stay another day in Europe. We would be on the first ship to Haifa. Still lost in his Kabbalistic dreams, a kibbutz drummer discovered a verse from the Bible which translated into numbers, and it made it possible for him to predict redemption in the weeks to come. We had left the tents for the musicians' block. We were now entitled to a blanket, a wash bowl, and a bar of soap. The bloc élétesse was a German Jew. It was good to have a Jew as your leader. His name was Alphonse, a young man with a startlingly wizened face. He was totally devoted to defending his bloc. Whenever he could, he would organize a cauldron of soup for the young, for the weak, and for all those who dreamed more of an extra portion of food than for liberty. One day, when we had just returned from the warehouse, I was summoned by the block secretary. A7713, that's me. After your meal, you will go to the dentist. But I don't have a toothache. After your meal, without fail. I went to the infirmary block. Some 20 prisoners were waiting in line at the entrance. It didn't take long to learn the reason for our summons. Our gold teeth were to be extracted. The dentist, a Jew from Czechoslovakia, had a face not unlike a death mask. When he opened his mouth, one had a ghastly vision of yellow, rotten teeth. Pause there briefly. Does it make sense to you that a dentist would have yellow and rotten teeth? Does the back of your mind start to say right now something's going on, something suspicious is happening? Let's see what's going to happen to Ellie and to his gold tooth. Does anybody else out there have any gold teeth? I have a crown, but it's not gold. It's made of like porcelain, so it looks like a regular tooth. Seated in the chair, I asked meekly, "What are you going to do, sir?" "I shall remove your gold crown. That is all," he said, clearly indifferent. I thought of pretending to be sick. "Couldn't you wait a few days, sir? I don't feel well. I have a fever." He wrinkled his brow, thought for a moment, and then took my pulse. "All right, son. Come back to see me when you feel better. But don't wait for me to call you." I went back to see him a week later, with the same excuse. I still was not feeling better. He did not seem surprised, and I don't know whether he believed me. Yet, he most likely was pleased that I had come back on my own, as I had promised. He granted me a further delay. A few days after my visit, the dentist's office was shut down. He had been thrown into prison and was about to be hanged. So the dentist, who we were a little suspicious about before, his office was shut down. He's been thrown into prison in the concentration camp, and he's going to be punished by being hanged. What was he doing? Let's see. Oh, it appeared that he had been dealing in the prisoner's gold teeth for his own benefit. So he had been taking out the teeth and using them to barter for himself, not because the Nazis had told him to. I felt no pity for him. In fact, I was pleased with what was happening to him. My gold crown was safe. It could be useful to me one day, to buy something, some bread, or even some time to live. At that moment in time, all that mattered to me was my daily bowl of soup, my crust of stale bread. The bread, the soup, those were my entire life. I was nothing but a body, perhaps even less, a famished stomach. The stomach alone was measuring time. In the warehouse, I often worked next to a young Frenchwoman. We did not speak. She did not know German, and I did not understand French. I thought she looked Jewish, though she passed for Aryan. She was a forced labor inmate. So as you guys might remember, we didn't get to dig into this quite as much as I would have wanted to if we were able to be at school, but Aryan is a race that was sort of made up, and they were the ideal people that Hitler was trying to have the world populated with. So people who are Aryan are people who had blonde hair and blue eyes, which a lot of people find really interesting because Hitler himself did not have blonde hair and blue eyes, but he believed that the Aryans were the greater race that we should be looking towards. So this young woman, Ellie thinks that she's Jewish. She kind of looks like she might be Jewish, which is tricky because you can't really look at someone and know what their religion is, as we've discussed before. But she passes for Aryan, so she could sort of sneak. So I'm curious what a forced labor inmate might mean, and I'm curious to see if we're going to find out as we learn more about her. One day, when Eidik was venting his fury, I happened to cross his path. Remember, Eidik is the guy who's in charge of the work commando, and Ellie has been warned that Eidik is known to fall into fits of rage and violence, and so they told him to steer clear of him. At this point in time, Ellie is there right when Eidik is starting to have a fit of rage. I happened to cross his path. He threw himself on me like a wild beast, beating me in the chest, on my head, throwing me to the ground and picking me up again, crushing me with ever more violent blows until I was covered in blood. I bit my lips in order to not howl with pain. He must have mistaken my silence for defiance, and so he continued to hit me harder and harder. Abruptly, he calmed down, and he sent me back to work as if nothing had happened, as if we were taking part in a game in which both roles were of equal importance. I dragged myself to the corner. I was aching all over. I felt a cool hand wiping the blood from my forehead. It was the French girl. She was smiling her mournful smile as she slipped me a crust of bread. She looked straight into my eyes. I knew that she wanted to talk to me, but that she was paralyzed with fear. She remained like that for some time, and then her face lit up, and she said, in almost perfect German, "Bite your lips, little brother. Don't cry. Keep your anger and your hate for another day, for later. The day will come, but not now. Wait. Clench your teeth and wait." Many years later in Paris, so this is one of those times where he's zooming forward to like the present time where he's out of the camp, okay? Many years later in Paris, I sat in the metro reading my newspaper. The metro is the public transportation. Across the aisle, I saw a beautiful woman with dark hair and dreamy eyes. I had seen those eyes before. "Madam, don't you recognize me?" "I don't know you, sir." "In 1944, you were in Poland, in Buna, weren't you?" "Yes, but..." "You worked in a depot, a warehouse for electrical parts." "Yes," she said, looking troubled. And then after a moment of silence, "Wait, I do remember. Eidik, the capo, the young Jewish boy, your sweet words." We left the metro together and sat down at the cafe entrance. We spent the whole evening reminiscing. Before parting, I said, "May I ask you one question?" "I know what it is. Am I Jewish?" "Yes, I am. From an observant family. During the occupation, I had false papers, and I passed as an Aryan. And that was how I was assigned into a forced labor unit. When they deported me to Germany, I eluded being sent to a concentration camp. At the depot, nobody knew that I spoke German. It would have aroused suspicion. It was imprudent of me to say those few words to you, but I knew that you would not betray me." It's pretty crazy, right? Another time, we were loading diesel motors onto freight cars under the supervision of some German soldiers. Eidik was on edge. He had trouble restraining himself. Suddenly, he exploded. This time, the victim was my father. "You old loafer," he started yelling. "Is this what you call working?" And he began beating him with an iron bar. At first, my father simply doubled over under the blows. But then he seemed to break in two, like an old tree struck by lightning. I had watched it all happening without moving. I kept silent. In fact, I thought of stealing away in order to not suffer the blows. What's more, I felt anger at that moment. It was not directed at the capo, but at my father. Why couldn't he have avoided Eidik's wrath? That was what life in a concentration camp had made of me. Brannick the foreman one day noticed the gold crown in my mouth. "Let me have your crown, kid." I answered that I could not, because without the crown, I could no longer eat. For what they give you to eat, kid, I found another answer. My crown had been listed on the register during the medical checkup. This could mean trouble for us both. If you don't give me your crown, it will cost you much more. All of a sudden, this pleasant and intelligent young man had changed. His eyes were shining with greed. I told him that I needed to get my father's advice. Go ahead, kid, ask, but I want the answer by tomorrow. When I mentioned it to my father, he hesitated. After a long silence, he said, No, my son, we cannot do this. He will seek revenge. He won't dare, my son. Unfortunately, Frantic knew how to handle this. He knew my weak spot. My father had never served in the military and could not march in step. But here, whenever we moved from one place to another, it was in step. That presented Frantic with the opportunity to torment him, and, on a daily basis, to thrash him savagely. Left, right, he punched him. Left, right, he slapped him. I decided to give my father lessons in marching in step and keeping time. We began practicing in front of our block. I would keep command, left, right, and my father would try. The inmates made fun of us. Look at the little officer teaching the old man to march. Hey, little general, how many rations of bread does the old man give you for this? But my father did not make sufficient progress, and the blows continued to rain on him. So, you still don't know how to march in step, you old good-for-nothing? That went on for weeks. It was untenable. We had to give in. That day, Frantic burst into savage laughter. I knew it. I knew that I would win, kid. Better late than never. And because you made me wait, it'll also cost you your ration of bread. A ration of bread for one of my pals, the famous dentist from Warsaw, to pay him for pulling out your crown. Wait. My ration of bread so you can have my crown? Frantic smiled. What would you like? That I break your teeth by smashing your face? That evening, in the latrines means like the bathroom, the dentist from Warsaw pulled out my crown with the help of a rusty spoon. That's right. In the bathroom, an old dentist ripped out one of Ellie's teeth that had a crown on it using an old rusted spoon. Frantic became pleasant again. From time to time, he even gave me extra soup, but it didn't last long. 2 weeks later, all the Poles were transferred to another camp. I had lost my crown for nothing. That's where we're going to pause for today. I want you to head on to the Google Classroom, go to the classwork tab, open up the night comprehension questions, and see how many questions you can answer today. I do want you guys to know that I am checking that classwork for each of you every day, and so I shouldn't be seeing them blank anymore at this point. We've been working on that since at least Thursday of last week. So please make sure you've got something on there for me to read about your comprehension work. I want to make sure you're getting credit, but I also want to see if we're understanding what's happening, because if we're not, I want to change how I'm explaining it in the videos to you so it makes sense. After you answer those comp questions, go ahead to the second video today, your vocab video. I'm just going to briefly review the correct answers from your assignment on Friday and then let you know what you should do today. Please remember, this Friday, the 27th, we are going to have a vocabulary exam. It's going to be on the Google Classroom, and you guys are going to do an amazing job. I can't wait to see how well you do. All right, go do your questions. I'll see you in a few minutes for vocab. Bye.